Hi, this is Chris Bredmeyer, Head of Admissions at Holberton School, a full-stack software engineering school based in San Francisco. Today I have a super cool interview for you guys, but first some background. We have been spending the past few weeks taking a deep dive into what it's like to be a student at Holberton, from the first few days to landing a job. Today is the last episode in a series of 6, and we are talking about the first job after the program. I've invited Lizzie to join me today, but first, quick ground rules. We will have a guided conversation for the first 30 minutes or so, and if you have any questions arise during that conversation, feel free to submit it as a Q&A, and we will have time at the very end to address any of those questions. Make sure that your questions are related to getting a job after the program or specifically related to things that Lizzie and I talk about. If you have other questions, things about admissions or other things along those lines, you can shoot me an email. It's chris@holbertonschool.com. Without further ado, Lizzie, thank you for joining us today. I'm going to turn on my video, but Lizzie, you can use your own discretion if you want your video on or not. But so my question, I think we're going to start off because I know that you are working now at Zume Pizza. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But just to give us some background, why don't you let us know what you were doing right before you joined Holberton, and maybe like why it was that you decided that Holberton was the right choice for you.
Sure. Hi guys, my name is Lizzie. I was in cohort 5 at Holberton, which finished about a year ago, or I'm sorry, about 6 months ago, and I've been working at Zume ever since. Before I came to Holberton, let's see, I had a really strong math background. I studied economics in college, so I had taken a lot of statistics, a lot of math, that stuff. Had not written a line of code in my life, except for in high school. I was really into making like a live journal backgrounds, HTML, CSS, that stuff. That was the entire extent of my computer understanding. I didn't know what a terminal was. I didn't know what like languages were. I had like no background whatsoever. I had been working in digital marketing in San Francisco at various startups ranging from small to even smaller. And so I'd kind of been around a lot of software engineers. I kind of knew what they were doing. I thought their stuff looked a little more interesting and more fun than what I was doing, which was writing newsletters, basically. And I kind of had that wake-up moment one day where I had spent like 3 days writing this email newsletter, and I had like just stressed and worried and sweated over like every line and every like period and every comma, and I was so like nervous about it. And as I was like about to press send, I was like, no one's even gonna read this. Like no one reads the newsletters. I'm making someone's day like worse. I'm just putting like spam into the universe. And I kind of had the thing that was like, oh, you know, the people making the software though, they're actually like improving things and creating things and kind of helping people. So I kind of had that moment, and I was like, I got to get into the other side of this. Looked around, looked at various of the, you know, big name boot camps that everyone's probably heard of, the kind of the 12-week set of boot camps, decided that I really didn't think that that was going to be enough background, that I wanted to go a little deeper, found Holberton, found it, I think, like 2 weeks before the cohort started, interviewed real fast, didn't really have time to like second guess myself, and was like, I'm just going to do it and let's see what happens.
It's funny, I have quite a few stories of students who joined the school like right before the cohort started, and for some reason they are just very successful. But I wouldn't recommend it, but yeah, I'm really glad that that's how it turned out for you. Okay, so you found out that Holberton, you know, based on your prior background and kind of what you wanted to accomplish with your career, you decided that Holberton was the right thing. Can you tell us what company you're working for now? Just like what it does. Yeah, it's a very unique company, and I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so I'm working for Zume, Zume, not the video conferencing service that we're using right now. Mm-hmm. We started as Zume Pizza. We are in South Bay. If you have been in South Bay recently, we have giant truck or train ads. We have billboards. We're in the very Southeast Bay now, and we kind of people like to call us a robot pizza company, and that's definitely part of it. We do have kitchens that we do have kitchens where robots are literally making pizzas. We put them on our trucks where machine learning algorithms in our ovens are actually deciding when and how to cook each pizza. And then we have proprietary packaging that robots make. But we actually are a little bit more than that. We're a full service food logistics platform, and we're actually spinning out into microservices and selling our technology to third parties moving forward.
Yeah, that's so cool. I was just looking up some of like watching the pizzas being made by Zume just earlier today, and it's fascinating. But what is your role specifically in all of this? You know, it's part like food service, it's part, you know, AI, it's part robots. Like what are you doing? Like what's your role?
So I'm on a full stack team, so I get to do both front end work and back end work, which is really great because I didn't ever really want to specialize. And basically we have these trucks, we cook pizzas on the trucks. One of our big things is we actually cook food on the way to the customer. So the pizza gets there fresher and faster than a traditional cook in the store, and then a driver drives it all the way. On the truck, there's an iPad. It tells the captain, which is the person in the truck, what to do and when. So for example, if you have 3 pizzas, it's going to tell the captain, put this pizza in the oven, put this pizza in the oven, you know, maybe make this salad. And then they come out of the oven, they package them and they package them and then give them to the last mile delivery driver, and then it's delivered to the customer. And so that iPad display on the truck, my team, there's only 5 of us actually, we're kind of in charge of all of that. So like the workflow management, the recipes, that stuff, as well as like the visual display that the captains see and interact with.
Wow, that's so cool. Okay, we'll probably talk a little bit more about the specifics of what your day-to-day looks like a little bit later. But I want to go back in time and talk about what it was like to finish the program here and start to transition into like even looking for this first work. Before you knew that you were going to be, you know, working at Zume, you had to start interviewing. What was that process like for you? And can you maybe share with us what the Zume interview was specifically like?
Sure. So the interview process for me was a little strange. I had started doing the preliminaries for interviews. I had done a ton of coding challenges to varying degrees of success. There were a couple that I had a lot of friends do that I just totally bombed. A couple I did well at. I had moved on kind of to the phone interview stage. And I actually got a call from my now director of engineering. And he said, hey, you know, we called the school. We have a really good, we have a good reputation with Holberton. There was a Holberton student already working there that is super successful and super great. And they were like, we know your reputation. We've worked with you guys before. I asked Sylvan, who's one of the founders of Holberton, to refer someone to come to an interview on Monday. Do you think you can come to an interview on Monday? And this was like Friday afternoon. And I was like, oh, maybe, sure. And he was like, do you know JavaScript? And I was like, definitely. So literally I spent like 2 days learning JavaScript in Vue, which is a framework. I had never used a framework before. I had never looked at React or Angular or anything, much less Vue, which is much, much less widely used than the other two. Came in on Monday. And an interesting thing about Zume is we do a lot of pair programming. So I would say weekly, probably 80% of my time is spent pair programming with other engineers. It's something that's really important to our culture here. The collaboration, the communication, and kind of ongoing learning is really important. So we actually, for our interviews here, we do hiring days where we bring in groups of candidates, and they actually pair together and rotate through stations, pairing with different people all day. So it's a really weird interview too. And I was like, I don't really know how to prepare for this. I don't really know the language. I feel confident about my programming fundamentals. So I'm just going to go in and ask a lot of questions and see what happens. Mm-hmm. And I sort of had written it off and sort of thought, well, this would be good practice and we'll just see what happens. So I get there at like 9 a.m. I have not like slept much all weekend. And just immediately it's, okay, here's a guy. It was a German guy. Here, you guys are going to do this Vue challenge, like have fun. And so it was kind of 30 minutes of us bumbling and kind of being like, well, let's check the docs. You know Vue? Do you know Vue? No. And so it was a lot of questions, a lot of trying to check the docs, a lot of just kind of trying to figure out what we were doing. I knew front end was going to be the worst one going in. And so I was kind of glad to get it over with. After that, I did a system design question that I was a little more successful about or successful with. Then I did a backend question that I felt much better about. Mm-hmm. And then ended with like sort of a soft skills, like process question. And so but kind of as the day went on, not only was I getting more comfortable with the environment and just kind of the act of being, because a lot of it is just practice. But was also kind of hitting the things I felt more confident in anyway. And so I guess I managed to pull it off somehow and got an offer about a week later.
Well, congrats. That's awesome.
Thank you.
And it sounds like it's a very different interview process than your typical like whiteboarding interview. Did you do any whiteboarding interviews at any point?
Yeah, I did two. I did
Okay.
2 whiteboarding interviews, and one I got an offer from, and one I did not.
What do you think were some of the things you really maybe like about whiteboarding interviews, or some of the things that you didn't like? Can you like basically compare and contrast those two very different experiences?
Yeah, so I do like whiteboarding interviews because, like I said, I did come from a math background. So the idea of algorithms, I think I'm good at. I think it makes sense to me. I enjoy that kind of theoretical thinking to a point, but it's hard. It's hard to relate the algorithm part of a whiteboarding interview into like what your day-to-day job is going to be like and what kind of things you're actually going to work on, because something that I was told a lot when I was interviewing, and I didn't really internalize it until I had started working for a couple months, was that you're interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you. And so as they're interviewing you also want to be mindful of, well, is this the place I even want to work? Are these people I want to work with? What's the environment? What's the culture? What's the vibe? What's my like daily life going to be like? Because you're making a pretty huge decision, and you don't want to just grab the first thing you can or take the first offer necessarily. And so I think the algorithms, the whiteboarding is hard because I don't think you get as much of a sense of that in some ways as you do if you're actually coding something on a computer using, whatever environments they use, whatever programs they use, languages, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons why it's really important to prepare for any type of scenario you might encounter, because I'm sure that, future students will have your very typical whiteboard interview, and other students will have something that's more similar to your experience at Zume. But it's just important to be prepared. And I love your advice about that you really need to approach an interview as you're also interviewing the company, because it is a huge decision. You're going to be spending so much time with those people in that space working on that product. And if one of those things like you're not interested in, if you don't like the people, or you don't like the commute, or you don't like the product or the mission or anything like that, you're not going to like your day-to-day job, I guess. That's really interesting. Okay. So speaking of day-to-day job, actually, I'll use that as a nice little segue. Can you like debunk or like demystify what your day in a life is sort of like? I think one of the hard things about getting into software engineering, if you've never done it before, or if you have limited exposure to other people who have done it, it's hard to like envision what does your day even look like as a software engineer? Are you sitting by yourself all day? Are you working with other people? How much time are you actually coding? Is it the majority of the time? Is it part of the time? Do your days look different, or do they all have the same type of flow? And I know for every engineer it's going to be different, but can you tell us a little bit about what your experience has been working as a software engineer?
Yeah, so my hours are pretty great, as most engineers I know are. I get into work probably about 9:30, and I like to work just by myself for a little bit. I like to kind of set a plan for the day, what I'm going to do, finish up any last minute things I might have from the last day before I start going into meetings. I like to use that time to return emails, just all that kind of administrative stuff. And then at 10 o'clock, my team has stand-up. So right now there are 5 of us plus our manager. And stand-up is really quick. Every engineer I've ever met, they do stand-up every day. Obviously, it's something you do even at Holberton as well, which is a very realistic, real-life thing. Mm-hmm. And you spend that time, it's maybe 5-10 minutes going around saying what you did yesterday, what you're going to do today, and any like blockers or dependencies you might need help on. So it's a really good way to make sure you always know exactly what your team is working on and how you can help people. After that, my team likes to do a lot of mobbing. And mobbing is when the whole team is kind of staring at the same piece of code and we're all working on it together. So it's a really good way to unblock if we are confused about something or we can't figure out maybe the logic to use. It's also a really good way to do code reviews, which is where you go through and look at code other people have written and make sure everything is okay and all the tests are passing and they're testing enough and there's no confusing variable names and kind of all that good stuff. And so we do that immediately afterwards. We try and do as many code reviews as we can and get stuff taken care of there. And then after that, on a typical day, my team, we break into pairs and we'll pair program until lunch and then break for lunch. Sometimes probably one day a week I solo, so I'm working by myself. We break for lunch, and probably at my company, we are really focused on continual learning, continual education. So we have what are called lunch and learns, probably at least twice a week. We had one today actually on testing, and I got to learn about some new testing frameworks, which is cool. And those are engineers of all levels can present those. The design department presents them as well. We had one earlier this week on a senior UX writer gave a lunch and learn on onboarding, how you like onboard new customers and kind of his considerations on that, which was really interesting. And everyone has an opportunity to present those. So if I came across something cool, I could like present that to people, which is a cool opportunity, I think, to practice like public speaking.
Yeah.
And then after that, after lunch, back at like 1 o'clock, we'll code again for another solid several hours. I think it's important to have kind of uninterrupted time to be able to really like get in the mindset and get in the flow. That helps me, as opposed to kind of context switching all the time. And then depending on the day, I might have another meeting or two, I might not. And then every 2 weeks, we have an engineering all hands. So all of the engineers get together and we talk about what we've been working on, announcements, shout outs, blockers, all that kind of stuff. So again, just making sure everyone in all of the offices, we have 3 different remote offices, knows what's going on.
Yeah. Do you ever have to work with other engineers remotely?
Yes. So every once in a while, someone in my team will be remote and we'll have to kind of navigate the pair programming. An example of that is another one of the Holberton students that works here. Her name's Sue. She's great. She was from the cohort before mine. She's been working here a little bit longer than me. She broke her leg and had to go back to Canada. And she's been in Canada for 6 weeks at her parents' house. And she's been videoing in every day and programming remotely with pairs and otherwise. And I was a little kind of skeptical how it was going to work, and it actually has been like totally fine. She video conferences in. We use Slack all the time, email, all that stuff, and so it actually has been pretty. It's easier than I thought actually to work with someone remotely.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that's an important component of software engineering is like eventually you're going to have to work with someone remote, and it's a very different experience. I think you just have to learn how to manage your time and how to manage communication effectively. And so that it's really great to hear that it sounds like Zume does that pretty well. Okay. So I want to, lighten the mood. And I want to know, as you were either prepping, doing like either mock interviews or actual interviews, did you ever like completely bomb something, like completely get something wrong and like totally bomb it?
Yeah, all the time.
Okay.
Definitely. Some of these coding challenges.
Can you talk to me about that process?
Yeah. So I had a couple coding challenges that especially the first couple, I didn't take them maybe seriously enough or didn't think about it. And I remember there was one, it was for an apprenticeship program at, I think, Dropbox. And like so many of my batchmates had gotten this. And a couple of them had done it and like, oh, make sure you're really paying attention. It's kind of tricky. And I was like, oh, it's fine. And they were like, okay, well, I finished. And people were like, oh, I failed one test case. Oh, I did this. And I was like, it'll be fine. And I took it and I couldn't even finish. I got like halfway through. I passed no tests. It was like so embarrassing. And then the next day everyone was like, how'd you do? And I was like, not so great. And so that was kind of a wake-up call to be like, no, take these things seriously. Like you need to prepare. You need to sit in a room, no distractions, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Do you feel like bombing that it allowed you to do better? Do you feel like it busted your confidence and it took a while to get back? Like, did you question whether you were qualified? Like, how did that kind of like emotionally play with like your technical skills?
So I think for me, it was kind of the opposite. I kind of tend to be a little bit of a perfectionist. I tend to kind of beat myself up when I make mistakes. And I think I was a little worried about making mistakes and worried about not getting jobs, because of course you always think you're going to be the person that comes in and applies for one job and gets the job, and like the first one you applied for and it's the dream job, and like you're going to be the one person that ever happened to, right?
Yeah.
And so I think going in, and this was one of my first coding challenges, you know, obviously bombing, I literally got an email that was like, oh, you didn't do well in the coding challenge, like we're passing because you did so badly. And I was like, I didn't die, like nothing happened, no one made fun of me, no one was like call me stupid, like it was fine. And so I think kind of giving myself permission to fail and being like, well, I'm probably not going to do that badly again was helpful.
I love that. Honestly, like that approach I think is so healthy. I want you to like shout that from the rooftops, and like anytime you ever talk to like a more green software engineer, like just share that insight with them, because I think that's so useful. I think that is the healthiest way to enter any interview, is like you do your prep, you do your work, you put your nose to the ground, you do your best. And at the end of the day, if they pass on you, you can't take it personally. You just have to like get back at it. And then look at you, you're at Zume, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am going to do a quick little announcement to anyone who's currently listening. If you guys do have any questions, feel free to add those into our Q&A. If you could specifically make sure that they're about what Lizzie and I are talking about. I do know that someone asked, is there a way to watch the other 6 webinars? And the answer is yes, they're all on our YouTube channel. I put them in a playlist so you can watch all of them. And yeah, so you can head on over there because this is the 6th and final one in our series. We will be doing another series probably in a couple weeks. We'll announce that later on. But if you wanted to get caught up, I'm talking with Lizzie. She was in one of our previous cohorts and is now working at Zume Pizza. And we've just been chatting about what the transition was like from the school on to her first work experience. Okay, so Lizzie, I'm going to travel back in time again with you, and I want to talk about some of the experiences that you had here at this school, and what you've seen has been useful that either maybe you didn't quite understand how it would be useful, like something from our curriculum or an experience you had at the school, and how it's kind of proven to be very useful, or vice versa. Maybe we did something here and you're like, I haven't used that at all now that I've been working. But yeah, I'm curious to hear from you what your experience at the school was like and how that specifically prepared you for what you're doing now.
Yeah, so the first one that comes to mind, which is kind of a non-technical note, is just the daily stand-up. So at Holberton, you have stand-up every day at, I think, 11:30. It's been a while. And during that, the students rotate in and out, and they give really short, like 5-minute presentations on any topic. One of mine was on like music venues, another was on bocce, so they can be on like anything. And kind of having that, just having that schedule of, every day at 11:30, I'm going to be here in this room and get announcements. That's very, very true to actually being a working software engineer. Like you're going to have that time to check in with everyone and to get announcements and all that kind of stuff. And then also having that public speaking opportunity and having that time where I had to get used to making presentations and presenting them and taking questions and asking good questions during other presentations. That was really, really useful. And that, I think, soft skills wise has helped me a lot, just already being in that mindset. And then technically the thing I always think about, and kind of one of the reasons why I'm really grateful and glad that I went to Holberton, is I work with a lot of people that went to big name boot camps. I think we have like 10 people that went to one specific, I won't say the name, but it's one of the big 12-week web dev boot camps that everybody has heard of. And they do really well at first. They know the tools, they know the IDEs, the program you code in. They know those better than I do. They know all these like kind of cool applications, all these little tricks, all this like very trendy stuff. And then, 1, 2, 3 months in, you start seeing the difference in that foundational knowledge. It's just there. And we start talking about data structures and algorithms and making these more design decisions. And, it's just without that foundational knowledge, you can't even participate in some of these conversations. even if, you know, I'm still junior, I'm not leading these, but I can hear and I understand what even people are saying. And you look around and other, you know, people are just lost. And so I think spending those 3 months on C, spending all that time writing those shell scripts, spending all that time, which at the time I'm sure I was like frustrated by, but it's just really paying off.
Wow. Well, that's actually really good to hear. You know, I think it was the last webinar I had actually our curriculum team talk about the specializations. And so for any of our listeners, if you haven't watched that one, again, go to the YouTube channel. You can watch the conversation about our year 2 specializations. But we had Alex, who's written the low-level specialization. And sometimes the question we get is like, okay, we cover low level in the foundations curriculum, you know, so that first half of the program. Why would you like specialize in low level? Like we've already kind of covered the foundations already. Like why would you, like how is that useful? And he brought up that basically, you know, if you want to work on a product or work for a company that's doing the same thing that kind of already has been done before. So building a website, building a mobile app, you know, social media platforms, things like that. The tools and you know, things already exist. But if you want to build something that's never been built before, let's say a pizza robot or a self-driving car, you have to like actually like design that from the ground up. And that's going to be low level. That's C stuff, you know, like that's, you know, going much deeper than coding something in a higher level language. And so, yeah, I think it's so interesting to see the ways that these foundations have really manifest and kind of given back to students long term as they've gotten further along in their careers. I think it's allowed our students to really move up within their careers quicker and more efficiently than someone who maybe walks in and has what you said is like kind of like the trendy information, but maybe not those really nitty-gritty foundations. But cool. Okay, so we are nearing the end of our conversation, and I want to respect everyone's time. So I'm gonna leave off with one question for you, Lizzie, and it is pretty straightforward. Do you have any recommendations for any students who are either thinking about like joining the school, or students that are already enrolled in the school and are kind of starting to think about like where they want to work? Do you have any advice to give any of these students?
Yeah, meetups, especially if you are in San Francisco. I went to so many meetups. I was like going to like 1 to a week. I still go to a lot of meetups. Again, like I said a little bit earlier, you know, and this is really true as I've started interviewing candidates as part of my job, that, you know, they're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. We've had candidates that I have interviewed that I have like been obsessed with, and then they say no, and I'm like, oh, what could I, you know what I mean? It's just not a fit for whatever reason. And so I think going to meetups, talking to as many working software engineers as you can, like talking to people, not managers, not hiring managers, not recruiters, but like working software engineers that are in those orgs and doing those roles and doing those things. And just, I've never met anyone that when I have asked them if I could buy them a cup of coffee and pick their brains for 30 minutes, and I had like good focused questions, I've never met anyone that said no. Like people are willing to help and willing to give advice and willing to like kind of point you in the right direction. And so I think just asking for help and meeting as many people as you can has been the most valuable thing for me. That's
really, really great advice. I will leave it at that because, you know, why just leave it on a great note. It doesn't look like we have any questions from our current audience, but my last announcement is that if you do have any additional questions, you know, feel free to shoot me an email, chris@holbertonschool.com, and you can head over to our YouTube channel, watch the entire series. I'll add this one up as well. So if you want to go back and listen to Lizzie's great advice, it will be available later this afternoon. And Lizzie, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to kind of, you know, share your knowledge and your experience. And have a great day and eat some pizza for me.
Yeah, no problem. I definitely will.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.